Pope Leo XIV has celebrated his first Mass after becoming the first American to lead the Catholic Church. Leo, who began the week as Cardinal Robert Prevost, was a surprise pick to succeed Pope Francis. Live to our correspondent Stash Butler at the Vatican. Stash, what do we know about Pope Leo and what did we learn from his latest speech and first Mass?
Well, Tim, I think we're learning more and more over the hours since Pope Leo XIV took the papacy. I think the basics were already set out in his biography. We know he's a 69-year-old who was born in Chicago, spent 2 decades working as a missionary in Peru, where he became a naturalized citizen, and has a deep connection with the Order of St. Augustine, of which he was the leader. But we think we're getting more of a sense now of the direction of his papacy. A lot of people have already compared him to Francis, seeing that he broadly represents a kind of continuation of Francis. I think in his homily today, the Mass he gave in Sistine Chapel this morning, there were already signs of that. He spoke of a urgent need for, in his words, missionary outreach, because in his words, the Church and the Christian faith seems absurd to many people in the areas of technology, money, success, power or leisure. So certainly a Francis-esque sound to some of those phrases that he used. We also had the first taste of him speaking his native English, because the speech he gave to the crowds here at St. Peter's Square yesterday here in Rome was in Italian and in Latin and in Spanish, but not his native English. We had a few remarks I can play you now.
Through the ministry of Peter, you have called me to carry that cross and to be blessed with that mission. And I know I can rely on each and every one of you to walk with me as we continue as a church, as a community of friends of Jesus, as believers, to announce the good news, to announce the gospel.
You've heard from a few close associates, Stash, of the new Pope. What did they have to say about the Church's new leader?
That's right, Tim. We heard from Cardinal Prevost, who was one of the 133, in fact, the youngest of the 133 cardinal electors who elected Pope Leo XIV. He's a bishop based in Melbourne, originally from Ukraine, and he described Pope Leo as a unifying force and said he already saw signs of that, and that he saw Pope Leo as a new chapter for the Church. He also described the fact that to many of the cardinals, including him in the conclave, I mean, conclave is a secret thing and he's bound to maintain secrecy over that for the rest of his life, but nonetheless shared a few insights, saying that it was unexpected for many of the people there, as it was for us outside. He also described a little bit about the process of conclave. We asked him whether it could be compared to the process depicted in the Oscar-winning movie Conclave, which I'm sure many of our viewers will have seen, and he had this to say.
Yes, I watched the movie, but actually it was controversial, especially about prayer. Have you seen in this movie that Cardinals prayed? No one time, which is Hollywood style. That was the best time of my life. Just try to turn off your phone at least for 24 hours, or at least my phone was turned off for 2.5 days.
We also heard from Father Tony Banks, an Australian who's known the new Pope for 44 years through his involvement in the Order of St. Augustine, who described him as a principled man, a quiet man, a very good listener, someone who's also visited Australia on 4 occasions and has a special place for it in his heart.
He loved Australia. He loved the beaches. We were up in Collaroy for the youth encounter. So you're walking out and you had the galahs sitting on your hand. It was just a wonderful experience.
Now, the Prime Minister has already invited Pope Leo to come to Australia in 2028 when there's a church event. In the meantime, I hope that we'll learn a lot more about the Church's new leader and how he intends to follow Pope Francis as leader of the Catholic Church.
Stash, I spoke to a friend of mine who was at the Vatican City during the process over the last couple of days, and they relayed to me the enormous sense of emotion. There's also an irony here, isn't there, that the new Pope is American when you look at the unsettled nature of what is coming out of the US. We've got a Pope who is looking to settle the world down.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the question of the American Pope. That was actually an interesting insight from Father Tony Banks on that point. He said he'd messaged the now Pope Leo XIV saying, you know, I think you'd be a great Pope, but I don't wish it upon you because it's such a task. And to which the new Pope replied, they won't choose me, I'm an American. That's because there had been, before this, an understanding that the Vatican tended to stray away from electing popes from the leading superpower of the time, in this case the United States, because they don't want to add religious power to a power that's already secular, economic, cultural, military. So I think a lot of, you know, this is a point that there's a lot of questions over, and how that will affect things isn't really quite clear at the moment. President Trump has obviously welcomed the new Pope's election, but also the new Pope has in times on social media criticised Vice President J.D. Vance. So I think this is a relationship that we're going to see play out over the next few weeks, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens there.
Absolutely, Stash. We'll get back to you through the course of the morning. Thanks for that.